that's a form of nullification. Okay, so got to remember, this is a slippery slope. When we start utilizing these tools, this is something easily can be used by. Marijuana legalization in Colorado is just another form of essentially nullification. It's a federal law. They're choosing not to enforce or allow being enforced into their state borders. Those are some of the things, we see some examples being used by, maybe a different, it's kind of a more, just imagine that on a mass scale. Those are just little things, but imagine that when people just do what they want to do, wherever they want to do it, and say, hey, it doesn't apply to us, it can get out of control pretty quick. And that's where I was talking about. It eventually leads to armed conflict.
Well, can't you answer that nullification by saying we must stick to those three rules that we're supposed to do?
Absolutely.
You cannot go beyond that.
Yeah,
and that's it.
So how do we know that the subject matter is important? Because I hear it all the time. Well, once they convene, they can change all the rules. They can talk about whatever they want to do.
If they want to go through another,
Yeah. Well, the rule. Why we know that the subject matter is very important. There's been over 400 applications, 430 applications for a convention of states. Throughout the 50 states, all states except for I think Hawaii have called for a convention of states. Yeah, we've never had a convention of states because there's never been 2/3 on any one subject matter, ever. Okay, so most of them all been asking for a specific amendment, but there have been, ours are on topics, and that's kind of unique. Ours is a little different because we're asking 3 subject matters. But most of those other ones are asking for a specific amendment. We've never had 2/3 on any of those specific amendments or on a specific topic. Now keep in mind, the very first application, you mentioned it from Virginia, was on a topic. Same thing we're trying to do. Their topic was to secure the liberties and the rights of Americans. And they were asking for a Bill of Rights. So they didn't specify what actual amendments that they wanted. They just said that we need to get together and have a conversation about securing the rights of our citizens. That's all we're trying to do, is we want to get a convention together to talk about these subject matters and allow the board of directors, which is the states, come together and talk about this organization that they're on the board of, which is called the federal government. We've had this federal government for over 200, how many years?
42.
242? Is that what we're up to now?
43.
243? 243 years, yet the board has never met. Okay? They have this organization they created. They never come together as a board and say, hey, things are out of whack a little bit. Let's fix this, right?
Yeah, I think repealing the 17th Amendment is paramount importance to get that board back together, because the U.S. Senate was intended to be the board.
Yeah, it was. It was supposed to be the state's voice in Washington, D.C. on a regular basis.
100 independent actors.
Yeah. So now we have basically 2 bodies that represent the people, and pure democracies always fail. That's usually a lot faster than republics. So that's essentially what we got now. Yes, 17th Amendment, horrible amendment. My dad, this is the one thing I remember my dad always telling me, 17th Amendment was the worst amendment ever passed. That's what he always said to me. I'm like, whatever, Dad, I don't understand what you're talking about. I understand it now. That was part of the check and balances. The federal government was divided, in so many different ways, 3 different bodies, and then the legislature was divided into the lower and the upper house, and the upper house was controlled by the states. Not the people in the states, but by the state legislatures. They got to choose those senators.
Does that fit under this subject?
Yes, it does. You can actually address that. Now, keep in mind, it is a horrible subject to bring up when you're trying to sell it to people. Okay? Because here's the narrative. And you always have to think about narrative. And we saw this at the convention that we held, the simulation, because they were very cognizant of what they could actually ratify. Okay, so if you do away with the 17th Amendment, the media will eat that amendment up. Okay, because here's what they're going to say to the people. They're taking your vote away. How do you sell that? So there's ways you can address that, though. You can put the state legislature back in charge of the Senate, let the people still elect individuals, but have the state legislatures be able to recall them, or even select the candidates that the people get to pick from. Something along those lines. But taking away the vote is very, very hard. And it can be addressed in this convention, absolutely. It would be germane. but you got to craft it in a way that it would be able to be ratified. And that's the one thing that you'll find out when you have that tall hurdle, that 3/4 of the states have to ratify anything before it becomes part of the Constitution. Okay, 38 states at minimum, right, have to ratify anything.
So
And
how in the world
you're
can-
not going to get anything.
How can you run away?
You're not going to get anything on either spectrum to the extremes. You just can't, because the high bar that it takes.
7 and 6 is
13.
13.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 7 houses are Senate and 6 of the other nationwide.
Well, we have 13 chambers out of the 99 could stop anything. You're right. Yeah, so there's 99 legislative bodies in America, because Nebraska, I said, only has one. Otherwise, we'd have 100. 13, if there were individual 13 different states, could stop any proposal. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a high bar.
Again, when you go to ratification, it doesn't actually get to us, the legislature then decides on that.
Yeah, yeah, the legislature gets to decide. Yeah, absolutely. So here's the key to this whole thing. You're not going to get the type of amendments that you want to see ratified unless you don't become part of the process. Okay? And it starts with electing people that are responsible and responsive to we the people. And the state legislatures are the individuals that the Founding Fathers knew were closest to the people, and why they gave them this huge power to be able to control the federal government and be able to control the compact that we all live under, which is the United States Compact, right, the Constitution. So they live in your communities. They are around. They shop at our grocery stores. They don't make a lot of money, right? Salaries is not very much in Topeka. You might hear otherwise in the media, but they don't make much. Their stipend or whatever they get for travel is not much at all. And that's similar in almost every state. Now, some states make more. Those year-round legislators in some of these bigger states make a ton more money. But these guys are part-time legislators. They have regular jobs. They have businesses that have to run back in their communities. And that's the way the Founding Fathers envisioned them to be. They wanted them in their communities, much like they wanted congressmen back in their home district a lot more than what they are. You know, people are making a big deal on being on vacation. They're supposed to be on vacation, which vacation means back in your district and living in what you created. So the problem is we have a year-round legislature in Washington, D.C. I'd rather them not be there as much as what they are. They can't do as much harm. And the other huge thing is those good people you talked about, if you were there, you'd probably be making some of the same choices, same, you know, the heart of man is what it is, you know. Power corrupts, and more power corrupts, absolutely. Absolute power corrupts, absolutely. So one of my dear friends now is Senator Tom Coburn. He's retired out of Oklahoma. I've been able to travel with him in 5 different states. I've spent a couple weeks with him at least on the road. And just driving time, we've been able to talk, and we still talk. I text him, he'll give me some great answers, some insight. And he talks about what it's like living and being in part of that beast that's called Washington, D.C., the belly, right in the middle of it. He did everything he could to stop the machine, and he'll be the first one to tell you nobody can stop it. You could send 40 or 50 new Tom Coburns up there. You could send this guy up there along with 40 other ones just like him, and it's still not going to fix the problem. That machine is too big. That's scary. You could send the guy that's supposed to blow up and drain the swamp up there, and they will fight him tooth and nail to keep a hold of that power that they have. They will fight it every way and any way that they can. That's why these guys here in the state of Kansas, these legislators, have to jump onto this what we're trying to do. Use the Constitution. Mason, you didn't mention this part, but George Mason in the Constitutional Convention, right before the end of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, he stood up because he recognized there was an error in the Constitution. Now, if you know anything about George Mason, most people don't. he was an anti-federalist. He ended up not even signing the Constitution because he said it gave the federal government too much power. Okay, even from the very beginning, he said he had to protect the rights. He was a Virginian, and he stood up and he said, "We screwed up, guys. We only gave the federal government a way to actually propose amendments. Because if the federal government ever grew to be in tyranny, it'd be ludicrous to believe that once tyrannical, they would ever propose limits on their own tyranny." So they talked about the second method, which actually was the original method they put back into the Constitution, which was the state convention process that we're talking about today. So even from the beginning, they knew that the founders knew that even by splitting into different branches and keeping the judiciary and the legislative branch and the executive branch and the states having their say, they knew that all that was just a matter of time before the federal government would grow to be tyrannical, and there had to be some fail-safes put in there. This is just another check and balance. We haven't used it yet. It's time we actually call a convention of states and actually put we the people's voice through our legislators back in charge of the federal government. Enough's enough. So that's where we're coming from. Glad you're able to be here tonight. Well, we're going to stick around as a group. There's several people. You see a button on them. They probably know a little bit about the project. We got Bob here.
Can I make just one little
Yeah.
interjection? We saw up there a list of the number of convention of states was common. It was commonplace.
Yep.
It was common for them to do it. It needs to be common again.
Yeah, you're
You
right.
know?
Yeah. The last time the states actually got together in a convention was in the 1920s. And it was a Colorado River Compact. Okay, and there was only 9 states that actually were invited and actually showed up. Kansas wasn't a part of that one, but yeah, New Mexico and the southwestern states all showed up, and they worked out an agreement. It didn't have to go through Congress. They just called a convention, and that's the thing. The states can do that anytime they want. They don't have to wait for Congress to act. Anything you want to add there, Bob?
Yeah, I want to tell you all a little story real quick. I'll try to be fast, because I tend to ramble sometimes. But what we're really doing here is trying to grow a grassroots army. Grassroots army of informed activists that believe in self-governance. And that's what we're really going after here. So we're wanting to spread the word about this and let people know what we're doing. Because it's going to take all of us. Our representatives can go and they can pass these resolutions. They can send some delegates off to a convention, but they're still going to need our support after that's over, so that we can get stuff ratified. This is an ongoing thing, and then we've still got to be able to teach our kids how to keep doing this, because like Mark said, we kind of forgot. We kind of let the government take over. We kind of says, well, all we've got to do is just go vote for these people and they're going to go take care of it. Well, they are. They are. 4 years ago, some friends of mine, one of them was Eric Smith. He's become a representative since then. He wasn't a representative back then. We were talking about how we felt like the government was getting out of control and stuff, and he said, well, what we need to have is an Article 5 Convention of States. Nobody knew what he was talking about but him. Okay, and I put it in the back of my mind and went on, and I was still trying to drive a truck then, and I'd go into fuel stops and I'd hear people talking, drinking coffee, and I'd hear people talking, well, when are we going to have another Civil War? How long are we going to keep putting up with this? And I'm thinking, oh man, we can't go there. We can't go there. And besides, who's going to be the boss when you get done? Mm-hmm. Think about that one. Mm-hmm. Our Revolutionary War is the only one. Our revolution is the only one in recorded history that ever reduced the size of government. The only one. I don't want to gamble on taking that chance. Besides, they put it in our Constitution